All right, so this video we're going to talk about what happened throughout last week and how we ended up and what we're doing to prepare for next week, right? So first, my technician missed Monday and Tuesday because he was sick and his kids were sick. So we had 3 days to try to catch up. I did what I could Monday and Tuesday, but it just wasn't all that good of a first 2 days. Wasn't crazy stressed out, and then Wednesday we did the working interview. Thursday and Friday, we continued that, and hopefully, we're going to be able to bring him in on the 18th. I still have to do a background check on him, and then we'll get 100% solid answer on that one. Um, Two things happened when I was checking over his work before, obviously we released it. An oil service was done on a vehicle, and the filter wasn't cleaned off, and it had a bunch of oil residue on it. That's not to our standard, and he left the shield loose on the bottom of the car. Now I had to redo, or I had to tighten it up, but we still had a lot of other maintenance that had to be done. So we did that one, and then the other one was an engine mount bracket. This car came in with a motor that was just hanging down, and it had two bolts that were broken. It's a Honda Accord V6. Two of the vertical bolts that hold the mount to the bracket were broken off, and so we ended up taking that apart, telling her what it needed. We ended up selling the new bracket, new bolts, and then we put the thing together. When I had to put it back together because the technician ran out of time to do it on Friday, and the alternator bolt that holds the top of the alternator was damaged, and he never put it together. So it was either over tightened from the previous guy that did the timing belt, or the alternator, and it broke. Right, so it looked like it was a fresh break. So I'm assuming the technician broke it, for it coming out. Uh, the other thing that happened was that there's three bolts that hold this mount over to the side of the engine, and the bottom bolt, I didn't know this until we put it together. The bottom bolt didn't tighten up, so the threads in the block were stripped out. And I would have thought that the technician, if the bolt was loose, I would probably have tried to tighten it to see if there was damage to it, and he didn't do that. Either way, he never mentioned either of those two problems to me. And so I spent a few hours trying to rethread the block. I had to cut a drill bit down because the 90-degree drill bit or 90-degree drill still wasn't enough to get down access to it. And so we got that rethreaded, and I put it together. And the rethread, the torque spec on that is 33 foot-pounds. I got to maybe 25 or so, and then it started to loosen up, so I had to stop. And it's going to have to be 2.5 bolts holding it in. The other option you have is to pull the engine out to do a rethread in it with an insert, because the helical is not enough. So this car is pretty rough. It's just I don't want to work on it anymore. I got her problem fixed, and that's just the way it's going to be. It just needs way too much, and I don't want to be the shop that last worked on this car. It's got 250,000 miles on it. It's leaking from everywhere possible. It needs tires. It's bad. And now we still do the inspection on it. The customer still has to know, the status of the car, and we still tell them everything that's wrong with it, so that way they can still make an educated decision towards the repairs. And so that was a fiasco. I had to come in yesterday, on Saturday, to get that one done. I had to finish the maintenance on the Toyota. That one had to get done, and that was just a lot of stuff. It was rusty, just extra time for cleaning everything for the brake job that it needed, cleaning the wheels and hubs to make sure they torque down properly. It was just there was a lot going on with that one, and it's a pretty nice truck, though, so I'm looking forward to helping her throughout the time she's here down at Fort Bragg. And then the last car that I had to finish up, this is the one that's kind of like, I don't know, it may be controversial. Again, the idea of this channel is not to have controversy. It's to explain what we do and why we do it. And of course, there's going to be people out there that don't do it the same way we do, and that's okay. So let's talk about this catalytic converter job that we were doing, okay, after that fiasco with this Chevy Traverse with aftermarket converters, and we're on the third one now with different brands. I'm just about done with aftermarket cats. So we ended up going to an OEM catalytic converter. Now in my shop, I don't care who the vendor is. I don't care if it's Worldpac, the dealer, AutoZone, O'Reilly's, uh, Jasper. It doesn't matter. I don't care what any of that is. When we build estimates, we have a parts matrix set up in Shopware that will say, we say our target. In my system, Shopware uses an AI parts matrix, and it is set at 62% gross profit percentage. It's different from markup. For the guys that are, kind of new at that, that's a big thing that people get mixed up on. Um, the reason we have it, my target is 58. The reason why we have it set at 62 is because we discount fluids, brakes, batteries are separate, I think. But when we sell these things, we discount those, I guess, to stay competitive. And if we sell those things, usually we will end up at our target at about 58%. Okay, so when we sell a catalytic converter, let's say this converter is $1,000, my parts matrix will probably want me to sell that converter for maybe 1,800. All right. For example, I don't know exactly. Now, because we went to this OEM cat, what we're trying to balance is we do have to maintain percentages to hopefully end up at our target for our gross profit and our net profit percentages. And that's why you have to have a baseline to kind of get started on doing your estimates. Now, in my shop, we do not sell parts and labor to a customer. We sell a repaired vehicle that we can warranty, and we build value in that. We don't sell it by parts and labor. Now, obviously, we build tickets and we have parts percentages and that kind of thing that we use to try to, meet our goals. But we don't sell that to the client. We sell them a repair. Okay, so what we were trying to balance and we're trying to experiment with, let's say this catalytic converter from the dealer is $1,000 and it retails out at $1,200. There's only a $200 profit percentage in that. And again, I don't care what it sells for. They don't know what we need to sell. They don't know what our targets are. They don't know what we need to sell parts for to meet them. So those MSRPs and the list prices that you see from on the invoices, they may or may not meet your goals, right? And your goals can be different from mine, and that's okay too. I just want you to know what they are, and you can decide. If you don't have a goal, you're never going to achieve it, right? So you need to keep these things in mind. So let's say this catalytic converter from the dealer retails out MSRP at $1,200. Typically, I would want to sell that converter for what my parts matrix is, so I can maintain my profit that I need to pay all my bills and put money in the bank for training and upgrades and growth and that kind of thing. So when we sell that job or we put that estimate together with selling the part, quote unquote, selling the part for $1,200, we only made $1,200 on that part. Typically, a catalytic converter job, this one paid, I think, 3.5 or 4 hours to do this cat. When we build that estimate, we look at a few things. We look at what my parts margins are. We look at what my labor gross profit is, which you really can't. I mean, you can do that, but it's going to stay typically about what your target is. And then you look at your gross profit per hour. Okay. Now the gross profit per hour is one of those targets or one of those KPIs you really need to be paying attention to, because when you go to the bank, you're not depositing percentages, you're depositing dollars, right? And the gross profit per hour is extremely important to make sure that you are meeting your minimum level of profitability. For my shop, I think we need to maintain right about $180 an hour for us to put money in the bank, pay the tax, pay all our fixed expenses, all these other things, pay for training. It comes out to about $180 an hour, give or take. Again, I can't even tell you 100% because still don't have an account that'll give me a P&L, right? And so this job, when my advisor put the estimate together, she just put it in at list price instead of what the matrix would do, because we were going to try to experiment with these things. And the way I see it happening is that we can sell it for, I wouldn't sell it for this, but let's just say it's sold for $1,200 for that part. And, it's an OEM cat. We're only going to get a 1 year warranty with that. For us to maintain our 3 year warranty, I want to put it through just like everything else. And it'll go through the system, and then it'll spit out the estimate, right? Now, on certain catalytic converter jobs, because things are so expensive, it might work out to like $800 an hour. And that's crazy, right? Because if you're making $800 in profit and you're only working on the car an hour, I'm going to take all of that $800 and put it in the bank. That's fine. What we're trying to balance is, at $800 an hour, it may or may not be ethical. Okay. It may be, and that's okay too. But we're trying to make sure that we're still making the money that we need to make. We are not trying to gouge our customer, and if that's what it comes out to, legitimately, I'll sell the job at $800 an hour. That's not a problem. But what we wanted to do was try to balance a 1 year warranty, a 3 year warranty, aftermarket versus OEM. How are we going to make these numbers work? Still be fair to the client, still offer them the warranty, or give them an option. Well, what happened was it was built that way. The customer calls and we haven't reviewed it together, and then she sells it like that. And we ended up selling that job for $167 an hour, which is literally less than what I need to make to stay profitable. Um, if you're busy and you have other cars to work on, if you do not have other things in the pipeline, you're going to do that job at a loss anyway, because you don't have other cars to work on, and it's better than no money, right? You have to keep in mind, this catalytic converter. Let's say it goes bad at 18 months, I'm going to be out of pocket. If we sold it, as a 3 year warranty, and we out of pocket $1,000 in parts, and this is like a 4 hour ticket or something, right? So it's a huge burden onto the shop, and you have to make sure that you're charging enough up front to be able to cover the customer, because you're here to provide a service. So that's kind of what biffed us on that one. What made it even worse is that the tech damaged the CV boot. That was an axle. My cost on an axle was $117. I couldn't get the boot, so that was another issue, and I had to get that part. Luckily, it was available the next day, and I was able to get it in on Saturday. This is where what happened with my advisor is my wife, and she's getting to the point where she's like not like doing the job anymore. It's too much stress, and I don't blame her. It's really hard without having like proper training and how to deal with like objections, and just a lot of phone calls with people that are just not fun to talk to. It gets taxing on your emotions and stuff. Well, this catalytic converter was sold. It was an OE converter. It didn't come with gaskets. She'd missed it, and the only gaskets I could get for this car were like Felpros, and they're the crappy cardboard style gaskets with that aluminum stuff over top. Those things are junk, and I'm not going to put those things on a car and then deal with a warranty issue for a manifold gasket leak after a year or two, and then it's a 4 hour job to try to replace the gasket. The only dealer that had these gaskets that were like the regular crush style gaskets, not the crappy cardboard ones, were 2 hours away on a Friday in rush hour traffic, and they weren't open Saturday. Otherwise, I would have went up there and got them myself to kind of keep her happy, right? And so then 4 hours of driving, dealing with two different parts departments, the dealership and then the warehouse, to pick up these parts to put this car together. It was just an awful day, and it just killed us for the week. Now, we made the revenue. We made more revenue than what our goal was, right? Especially with only 3 days of a tech here, for only 3 days. So we did well money wise, but I'm not in the business solely to make the money. It has to be at a reasonable cost, meaning like stress level, right? So that was bad. The other car that was a problem is this Toyota Avalon that has the intermittent battery draw problem. We verified the EFI relay is coming on. It's being commanded by the PCM or the ECM, and I tried to do some research on it, and it came out to like the most probable cause is something wrong with the ignition switch or the key indicator when you leave the keys in the ignition. Now, when I brought it back in today for testing to try to get this thing out of here, the EFI relays wasn't clicking anymore, but I had intermittent overhead lights coming on. I have an instrument cluster that's not working properly. And so I'm like, I'll just look at those things and I'll start unplugging the switch and see what happens. And nothing changed. So we fixed the two other problems that she had with an undercharging problem from corrosion and a battery draw problem from the factory radio. It has another issue, and I do not have the manpower to deal with that. It's like I have one technician here. I'm not going to stick him on this car. It's 26 years old. It's just like I had enough. So I'm going to contact the customer and give her a referral to another shop that deals solely with electrical stuff, and she's going to have to deal with them. I'm over it. Okay. The other car that was giving us a little bit of grief was a Chrysler Sebring that came in with a bad harmonic balancer and tensioner. And that mistake was the wrong balancer was put on the estimate. Apparently, it's two different balancers. Only one vendor had both of them in stock. The other vendor had one version in stock. So when it was estimated, she didn't realize that there was two options and the one's different than the other by like an inch. So unfortunately, I couldn't get a hold of the customer Friday because we were so slammed. Because the advisor left at 3:30, and I was in here in the office trying to manage whatever I could to get things closed out, talking to customers and those kind of things. That I couldn't get a chance to give him a call. Again, it was a drop off, and he's in a loaner. So then I tried to give him a call on Saturday, and he didn't answer his phone like three different times. Otherwise, I probably could have had the right part here today and got it knocked out, and had a good start for the week. I think that total was like just over $1,000 before the belt, tensioner, belts, and harmonic balancer and the evaluation cost. So it would have been nice to have that done before we even get started in the week. And then unfortunately, once he approved it, found out it's the wrong freaking harmonic balancer. So that's coming in. So that was a problem. And then the Passat with that EPC light, if you were following the channel the last couple of days, it came back on. Now the customer was told ahead of time that we can't verify any of these things. The only thing we can do is just do these things as a first step. So we will do a fault scan for him for free, but for any more testing, it's going to come at a cost. I'm not going to keep going into it. And if I can't find the root cause of the problem, then maybe I'll just punt that car and possibly return the money. It's just really hard to say whether or not it's whatever we see. Return the money for the second eval. He's not getting money back on the first one because it needed those things anyway. And then the last car that's given us a little bit of an issue, which is a super cool customer, is a Jeep that has a heat soak problem, and we're getting vapor lock in there. So I'm currently in the shop right now just trying to get an answer on that one. And so we talked about gross profit per hour. The gross profit per hour, if you're interested in that, check out a person named Becky Witt, and she's got a Facebook group. I think it's called the Becky Witt Shop Management. I think it's what it's called, something like that. I think she bases most of her repairs and estimates on gross profit per hour. Okay. She's definitely into it. She does classes on it at any of these training conferences. She's actually doing one in North Carolina. I think it's North Carolina for Fueling Connections is what it's called. It's like a 1 or 2 day event. I just saw something on Facebook about it. So that's something that you want to dive into to make sure it's just another KPI you want to manage, right? The gross profit per hour, it's usually really bad offset when you have a very high labor ticket and not a lot of parts are being on it. A great example is a rear main seal. A rear main seal on a 4-wheel drive truck, it might pay 10 hours, right? And whatever your labor rate is, and then you sell the seal. Let's say the seal is $20 and your parts matrix might actually mark it all the way up to $100, right? It just depends on what that is. your gross profit per hour on that job is probably going to be in the toilet. Um, and because typically you want about 1-to-1 or a 60-40 split of parts and labor. So if you sell that rear main seal for $100 because that's what the parts matrix is, and you look at your gross profit per hour, it might, my target is 100, and like I said, about 175, 180, and we might end up being on that job at 140. Then at that point in time, if you have a list of cars you need to work on, you are losing money working on that car. It is less. It costs you money to do that repair, and the gross profit dollars might be good, but it's going to take a long time to get that job done. So that's where you really need to be paying attention to it, and that's why the catalytic converter one, typically those are through the roof because it's such an expensive part, and some catalytic converters might only be like an hour worth of labor, but your parts matrix shoves it up so high because it's an expensive part that your gross profit per hour might be through the roof. And you have to figure out what works for your company and how, you know it's not justified, but explain your pricing so that way you can take care of the client. So that's when you see really big swings, when they're not balanced, your parts and labor aren't balanced. So Uh, Friday was a rough day. That was a pretty rough one. But overall, the week was good. But I'd much rather have less revenue with way less stress. So, all right. Thanks for sticking around.